There we go. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. It's always fun trying to get the technology rolling. It's kind of like we're new to this each and every week. So it's whatever. So good. I just want to make sure my mic's on right. I can hear you perfectly. And welcome. Let me go back here and I want to see comments. Okay, I can see. All right, we're good. All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another edition of WebPageTest Live, your favorite hour each and every Thursday. Actually, each and every other Thursday for now, anyhow. But no, we're glad that you could join us. As usual, we're going to talk about all things performance, all things web page tests to an extent. And we like to have some guests with us each and every time that we do go on, whether it be myself joining Tim, whether it be Scott joining Tim, or Scott joining me. I don't know, whatever it is. But we like to talk about performance and all the things that we're working on and share that with the community essentially. But this week, we do have a special edition. I do have a special guest with me today. I mean, all our guests are special, but this one's extra special because we do have a lot of things to talk about. So I'll let my guest introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Peeters. I'm from Belgium. I'm a principal engineer at Gatsby, and I lead the uh, open source team as a tech lead. So I try to create a vision and see where we need to go from all the things open source. I have three goats that I have to take care of, and two horses. I don't
Oh,
ride them myself, but I do take care of them.
you never told me that. You have three goats and two
Yes.
horses? That's amazing. I mean, you gotta love life in Europe, man, because it's when I hear these things, I'm like, that's so amazing. Yeah, like I mean, I'm assuming you live sort of on the outskirts of
Yes.
town. I'm
Yep.
assuming. Okay. I mean, it's like parking for a horse would be pretty interesting. But that's pretty amazing. You'll have Vice over at Chrome.
Nice.
Vice. You have you may have seen him, performance engineer as well. He actually, I'm pretty sure he has goats as well. So
Okay.
y-
I have to connect with him then.
yeah, please, I want to hear about these stories. But that's awesome. And so you're currently at Gatsby, and you've been there how long?
3 years now. So almost one of the oldest people there.
Oh, okay. So you're like a veteran, basically.
Yeah, veteran. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And you've joined Gatsby, and essentially you're one of their many performance engineers there.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a few who are like very well versed in performance, but I've been doing performance I think for 10 years now. So I worked at a newspaper company before Gatsby for 4 to 5 years, where performance was all that matters, and that's why I like use tools like WebPageTest to get like more insights in like everything performance wise, and that's how I got all the knowledge over time. Also worked on Lighthouse as a contractor for I think 2 years or something. So
Awesome.
it's been fun.
That's amazing. And yeah, I mean, are you able to name the paper that you were working with, or is that?
It's called Media House. It's like a Dutch, a Belgian one, and they had like back in the day 5 brands: Nieuwsblad, Gazet van Antwerpen, and then they bought like a big newspaper company in the Netherlands, which is the Telegraaf, and that's where I think I worked there for a year then
Mhm.
because of the merger, and then I left and went to Gatsby. I
Oh,
have
that's
to let my
amazing.
dog in. He
Okay,
wants to be part of the live stream.
amazing. Horses, dogs, goats. Is there something else you're gonna, reveal? More animals?
I have two turtles, like grease turtles.
Okay, all right.
That's all.
That's amazing. But I think that's fantastic that you know, even back then, because we can get into the conversation afterwards, but even back then you were working on performance at a newspaper, and we often talk about some of the challenges and some of the businesses out there, especially in media,
Yep.
who are sort of handcuffed at times for a number of over a number of things that they have to look after, and you've been sort of looking into that since for a little while now.
Yep. Yeah, hardest part with newspapers, and I guess lots of marketing sites, but maybe newspapers are um, a big one because they have advertisements. Most marketing sites don't have advertisements; they only have third-party scripts.
Hmm.
But advertisements is a whole different world where you don't control it. Like third-party scripts, you more or less control because you are the person who puts them on the
Hmm.
website. Whereas ads, you put the placeholder there. You can
Correct.
put an ad here, but then whatever it gives, it gives. So that's been a struggle. That's been the biggest struggle, I think, for newspapers.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's very interesting because I've always said, like, media, uh, they certainly have one of the bigger challenges when it comes to performance, and uh, between them and what I consider another challenge is e-commerce. They have like a lot of the problems performance-wise on the web just kind of rolled into one, and they sort of pose a challenge each and every time. So that's it. That's amazing that you come from that kind of experience and you're able to bring that over to Gatsby. Um, but speaking of Gatsby, we are going to spend the next little while talking about that. First of all, I want to announce, and I think we tweeted that out. We're going to be at Gatsby Conf next week. WebPageTest. We're pretty excited actually to be sort of like part of the festivities there.
Yeah, we are
Gatsby Conf.
too.
Pardon me.
We are too.
Yeah, anywhere there's going to be performance conversations, we're always delighted to be there, and we, at least I've always known that Gatsby has been a org always discussing performance. And in fact, I think I told you this prior. I discovered Gatsby because of performance, really, because I think the tagline was something about being faster and all this stuff. And at the time, I was running the performance meetup in Toronto when we were able to do things in
Nice.
person. And I was like, okay, Gatsby, why don't you come down and show us how fast you are, and because I had no idea what Gatsby was, but it was fun to have the conversation. And it's a conversation that we're going to have today, in fact. So I don't know how many people are watching. I think we have just under 10 right now, but I mean, we tend to be a little late, so people join us a little later. But yeah, we I do want to talk about some of the efforts that Gatsby is undertaking moving forward. But I certainly do want to talk about where sort of Gatsby got going with performance, why, and I mean, I'm assuming as the veteran, someone who's been there. Self-claimed veteran, obviously, someone who's been there. I'm sure you'd be able to share some of the early insights over at Gatsby.
Yeah, so in the beginning, I would say we were definitely the fastest by a mile apart, where we put all the efforts what Google said back in the day, like the purple pattern, where basically when you hover over a link, preload it, and then when they click on it, it's already there, like all those patterns, and making sure that the bundle was all optimized so you don't have to, because that's a big thing. Like you're getting lots of components from everywhere, and then put it all together. And if you just use Webpack by default back then, it didn't do a very well job.
Hmm.
And those are all the things that Gatsby did very well. And then, of course, other frameworks looked at us, um, learned from what we did it themselves, and then we did the same when they did something cool, and so on and so on. But now we see a lot of new frameworks coming in with like Astro, where they like, oh, you choose who to which part to hydrate. We see Svelte taking lots of attraction, view, all of those. And then we're like, oh, we're React based. React is doing things with server components, but that's where we are now like really trying to figure out where do we need to go and how can we be again a mile apart, because now we're still ahead of the curve most of the time, but that's mostly because of the static nature of what we do. We also do SSR, but we tell people like, hey, if you want to go fast, go static, and we were pretty good at it.
Mhm.
But we see that the gap between other frameworks is not as big, and then we still also have the problem of like React. It's not the fastest, like it's quite bulky, depends on what you want to build, but it still has a great developer experience. And the React team is working on it to make it better as well. And we are trying, like we're doing that too, but it's mean like that's where if people look like from a performance lens at frameworks nowadays, it's like, oh, they use React or they use that, and it's like, oh, it's bulky and this, but you also have to think about the other side, like the DX. If you have to do all the performance stuff manually, you're never going to do them, or at least not at a big enterprise. And that's the struggle we're feeling now too. Like the we want to be super performant, but also have great DX. Like how do you get to that basically?
That middle
So
ground.
yeah,
And that's a very important, actually, discussion, because people often overlook the DX portion. And, even for a tool like WebPageTest, uh, I'm sure, as you'll remember, when you were using it at the newspaper, it wasn't the prettiest.
no,
And we've always felt that that may have been one of the sort of early hurdles to get people sort of onboarded, because already it wasn't you know amazing to look at. And then there was this data dump, and people were just kind of like, oh, confusion, whatever. But we've been able in the last year and change, you know
definitely.
add a nice coat of paint, early on. And then the more recent coat of paint that we added, the UI updates and whatnot, we feel that we're able to make it something much more of an attractive tool for people to use. And then after that, they just can still pinpoint some of their data that they'll need anyhow.
Yep.
And you mentioned sort of being kind of like at the mercy of React. And again, getting back to the idea of the developer experience, was there any other sort of option ever outside of React that you guys ever explored, but you're just kind of like, what, this is the developer experience is just too good to let go?
If we're exploring it as we speak, basically, so we know that React has a bright future. It has many people, but we also hear the voices of like, oh, we are versed in Vue. Why can't we use Gatsby? Because Gatsby also has its data layer where you install a WordPress plugin and you get all the data, and you don't have to write any glue code to or learn the API of like WordPress or Contentful or whatever CMS or API you have. And then it's like, okay, but I don't want to learn React, or I don't want to convert my whole dev team to React. And that's why we're like exploring how can we do multiple renders. I think Astro shows that how well it can work together.
Hmm.
And then also figuring out, okay, what if you make a marketing site? Maybe React is too much. Like React is
Hmm.
great for applications and so on and so on, but maybe Svelte or something else is better for a marketing site, and find a middle ground. But the struggle you have then with the plugin ecosystem, how do you tell people this works for the Vue one, this works for the Svelte ones, or this one works for everything? Or how do you make those abstractions? And I think Stencil, those kind of frameworks where they already made the abstraction,
Hmm.
might be a good fit for us, where we say like, let the Stencil people manage the abstraction. We know they're doing a great job, and we'll just benefit from that, and then people can choose whatever they want. But it is definitely on our mind to figure out how can we go to different frameworks, but also not lose the DX, like the hot reloading. I think every framework now, or every library, I don't know what to call
I
Vue
know, I'm
React.
always confused too.
um, they all have hot reloading and those things, but there's also the things like when I look at islands, the island architecture, I only hydrate the header, I only hydrate the footer.
Mhm.
You're kind of missing a little bit the going from A to B to a new route.
Mhm.
How do you make sure that your content changes or that everything feels still naturally when you do a transition from URL A to B. That's what islands don't really provide very well, or it's like lots of custom code.
Hmm.
And we're trying to figure out, okay, we want to go islands pattern, but how do we do it properly or that it like makes sense for everyone? That's like the struggle when you're a big framework and get adopted by many people.
Hmm.
You kind of want to make sure that everyone is happy, and you can make everyone happy, but at least find a middle ground. So
Yeah,
that's
the
mostly the
majority,
difficulty. Yeah.
yeah, of users. And you know, and Gatsby's really interesting because there are a couple of things you mentioned already, like the plugin ecosystem. Because in sort of history, I've known plugins to be a bit of a challenge. You know,
Yeah.
and that's something I definitely want to dig into at some point. I mean, obviously, there's a very well-known comparison when it comes to plugins, and I talked about this week how WordPress is, they finally have a performance team, really
Okay.
looking
Didn't know.
after. Yeah, like they made the announcement, I think, late last year, and now every week they have meetings, talk about the new priorities and their plugin ecosystem. And people talk about how do you manage that, because a lot of times that's some of the challenges. Third party plugins come in, and they may not be vetted well, for
Hmm.
on a performance level. And so I was wondering, like, how does Gatsby handle that part?
Currently, not that well. Like we have our official plugins, and we have a list of we know they are uh, graded well or like have the mark of approval,
Mhm.
but it's still difficult for us, or especially for our users. Like I know which ones are good, I know how to look for them, but
Mhm.
that's 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 normal that I know because if I didn't know, we have a problem.
Yeah,
But
yeah, 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 yeah.
it's definitely a struggle. But I think it's the same problem with like npm ecosystem and stuff.
Mhm.
Which component or which npm library is good? Like, is it not too big? Is not too small? And like we are not doing a great job for the Gatsby plugin ecosystems. You have your official um, icon there that says like it's maintained by us,
Mhm.
which should give you confidence that it's well. And then I think if you know that it's backed by a company, for example, if you use Sanity, Gatsby Source Sanity is by maintained by them,
Mhm.
you definitely know it's going to be a good one, and
Yeah.
not if it's Sanity 2 or something, stay away from it. But what we're thinking, and it's just thinking nowadays, is how can we maybe make like lighthouse for plugins where you get on our website, you see the batch A, B, C, like grades or something, and if it's a
Mhm.
C, it might not be compatible with the latest Gatsby version. It might not score that well on lighthouse because we have specific apis to hook into the browser. So you could just do React components, but we also have like on client entry, for example, is some hook we have in Gatsby browser.js where you that loads when React is done with hydration. And that's mostly the point where you should inject your analytics, because then your images are loaded, or at least are starting to load and almost done. JavaScript is done, like everything is hydrated, and now you can do the bits who don't really benefit the user experience.
Mhm.
And if we can say like, okay, this plugin is an analytics plugin and it doesn't do it on that hook, we'll grade it lower. Like those kind of things
Mhm.
we can do, but that's like in the planning phase. Okay, how can we make that happen? And it's more like a lighthouse tool around plugins because it's kind of neat because we have like unpackage the CDN, which you can just download files
Mhm.
from npm. Basically, if we could leverage that and basically make like a bot that says like this plugin and downloads everything from npm, runs it through some end-to-end test or lighthouse kind of infrastructure, give it the grade, and then we have an automatic process of like this is good, this is bad. And if we upgrade to a new major like Gatsby 5, for example, um, that's where it gets tricky because maybe 70% of all the plugins are still V4 compatible.
Mhm.
We try to work with partners like all the source plugins, all the CMSs. We say like, hey, V5 is coming. These are the breaking changes. Would be very nice if you be ready for us
Mhm.
when V5 handled. We did that not so great with V2 to V3, but with
Mhm.
V4 we had all the major players ready to go. Um, and then that automatic tool would just run all the plugins over again and say, okay, these are not yet. And then users know, okay, it's not V5 compatible. We should stay away from it or not upgrade to V5 yet if it's out, those kind of things. But it is a big struggle. Now it's mostly Discord asking us like, hey, I'm using this one. Is it a good one? And then
Yeah.
we try to look at them. But yeah.
And then do you give your plugins a little bit of like performance benchmarking as well? To just to
Currently
make sure.
not,
Okay.
but that's the plan. So basically, and that's also the great thing about Gatsby is that a lot of things happen at build time.
Hmm.
So the build time, if it's not super performant, I mean, then on like build seconds, it's not too problematic. Depends on the scenario, of course. Like 5 minutes between 10 minutes, it's a big one. But if it's like a few seconds that your build takes longer, not such a big problem. But then for the because a lot of things happen at build time, and then the only thing that happens at runtime is mostly the React components, analytics, those kind of things. And we provide like official plugin for GTAG, GTM, Google Analytics, and those are good because we wrote them. But there are plenty of them where we don't really know, um, and that's when customers come to us. We just look into under the hood and see, okay, you're using this one, you should not use it, but maybe just extract the code, put it in these
Yeah.
um, life cycles, because most plugins load a JavaScript file
Yes.
or like something, and that's where I think Next did a very well job with the script component, where
Okay.
they have like a script, and you can say this is lazy, or I don't know the props per se, but they say this is Google Analytics script component. You mark it as priority A, B, or C. Mostly the third party C, and then they load it at the right time. And we have
Yeah.
it with life cycles, but it's more developer facing. Like you have to know Gatsby to understand it. And if we also have a script component that says like, oh, this is analytics or third party, like type third party, we know. And the user, the developer knows probably too that Google Analytics is a third party, so
Yes.
they know which the correct setting to set on. And then Party Town, I think that's a very cool piece of technology that like runs third parties off the main thread. And
Hmm.
if you can put that in like a script component way that people don't even think about party time, they just know third party and the framework handles everything.
Yeah.
I think that would be huge.
Yeah.
So that's also what we're looking into. And they're also going to talk about that at Gatsby Conf. So
Which is almost, and we're talking about that DX as well. Party Town is just on paper delivering what seems to be some pretty good DX. Like you said,
yeah,
you kind of like you don't have to deal with some of the issues. You could just
yeah,
boom, it just splits everything accordingly. So I'm imagining this is also some of the challenges you probably are having with themes as well, because Gatsby does themes,
yep.
and everything that you sort of experienced or just discussed in the what do you call it, the plugin ecosystem. You're probably having some of the same challenges in the theme ecosystem as well.
Yeah. And in the beginning, we just embraced all the teams,
Hmm.
just said like, um, we skimmed through it, but like real, like just skim through it. Like, look, does it look good? Is it a duplicate? No, we'll allow it to the teams directory,
Hmm.
and then. But now, I think a year ago or half a year ago, we said like, no, we're just gonna remove all the things we don't think are great. We
Hmm.
also send that message to the community, like, hey, you have to be on V4. You have to be like good enough, and we'll do like we graded a few of them ourselves, and now we're going to open it up again, but there's going to be a manual process, so people
Hmm.
can add their starter, and then we have to go through them, because it's very like, if you have thousands of themes, it's great because there's many flavors, but if there's only 10% that are good
Good.
enough,
Yeah.
you're basically setting up 90% of your people
To fail.
um, to fail. Yeah, and that's
Well,
something we
fail
want to
or
do.
just have
Yeah,
potentially provide like a poor experience
Yeah, yeah,
to their users and whatnot. Uh, this is so interesting because I mean, I can get into it later, but I always envisioned something like this potentially taking place because I think the theme ecosystem is really good, but a lot of times they don't have the best user experience in mind. Whether
yep.
it be performance or everything else, and
Accessibility, yeah.
exactly, exactly. Um, I know you want to maybe potentially show some stuff that your guys working on, or
Yes, let
I
me
want to make
see.
sure. I hope I know how to share here. There we go. There we go.
Let me. So I just want to go quickly over like a Gatsby site. This is
Yeah.
something I did for a friend of mine, which is a bookkeeper. This is all built in Gatsby. I just want to show a little bit of like what Gatsby gives you out of the box, like performance wise, mostly. Also have a web page test, and it will show a few things that I haven't done yet, which
Okay.
is shame on me. But like every project, it's still a work in progress, but it's at least good enough. So
We're
it's
we're
just
still friends. Don't worry.
so the things I wanted to mention here is what a difficult thing is for websites is images.
Hmm.
And let me see, let me open it up. So we have a custom plugin called Gatsby Plugin Image,
Hmm.
which is a React component, but it's tailored for Gatsby with things it does. For example, it doesn't wait for React hydration to be done
Okay.
to show the
Image.
image. So
Yeah.
beforehand, we had problems with Gatsby Image, the predecessor of it, where it waited for hydration, and then Lighthouse changed from V5 to V6, I think,
Hmm.
where they said like LCP is now a thing,
Yeah.
and now you basically all everything scores were very low because images started with a placeholder, and then maybe after 2 seconds on 3G and Moto G4 it was like 2 seconds and LCP happened, or 3 seconds, which was way too slow. But then what Gatsby does now is if I go in offline mode, or doesn't really matter what I do, like super slow.
Hmm.
Maybe I do disable cache, but it will still be slow. We have the placeholder automatically.
Yep.
And this is not going to show. The images go like go in, but even if I disable, let me show this because this is what I mostly proud of. Is like if I disable JavaScript or it breaks or something, the image still works. And
Nice.
then like React is not hydrated because I blocked the request. So if I do services, it was a network request, like a browser navigation. That's also something that Gatsby gives. Like it hydrates with React, but if it's not available, you would still get your H tags. Your accessibility is still intact.
Nice.
That's, I think, like a great benefit that you don't like. Okay, we use like React and all those kind of things. You can build very cool things with it, but the user don't have to wait for it to load to be responsive, basically.
Hmm.
And the other thing with images is that we generate like WebP for this site. It seems like a disabled AVIF, but we're going to enable it soonish by default. The reason why we disable it by default and just have WebP here now and not
Hmm.
AVIF by default is we process these images now at build time,
Okay.
and only if we do it once, if you have 1,000 images, making a scenario for WebP,
Yeah.
for AVIF, and then for all different viewports,
Hmm.
it's still like it can um, be very expensive. But we have announcements at Gatsby Conf that I can't talk about yet
Okay.
uh, to
That's good to
make this
know.
better.
All right.
Um,
Speaking of GatsbyConf, for those who need to know, you can still register right now, so you can get the big news from Wart, and you can come see us in the booth as well.
and what I noticed with like images, it's a pain to set up, like very difficult. Like if I have to set it up manually, I have to figure out, okay, what does these things all mean with source sets?
Hmm.
And with Gatsby, let me see if I can show. Maybe it's too technical. You have to let me know. But
No, keep going.
this is GraphQL, and this could be like difficult for people to understand, and because it's new. But I don't want to talk about the GraphQL part per se, because you can go to our tutorials and see it. But basically, if you do
Hmm.
this query, like I have a title background, Gatsby image data, say the layout it needs to be like we have constraint, which is basically it cannot go up to, yeah, this is height, but we'll calculate the height. Let's say it's 300 pixels. It can go to 300 pixels, but if it goes wider, it will
Yeah.
not be fully responsive. But if it goes smaller, we will be responsive. And then you can set a placeholder or not. But this line basically generates all the data necessary to generate something like this. Instead of you have to figure out, oh, which viewports do I have? And you can configure them as well. Like there are things like which breakpoints do you want. We have good defaults, but if they
Yeah.
don't work for you, you can override them. We
Nice.
also do like decoding async. You can set eager loading if it's the first one. That's manual on the component itself, or you can set lazy. Like all of those things, the framework takes care of.
Hmm.
And then other things that I'm gonna see if I can show is like when you hover over it, doesn't show me. I still have my JavaScript disabled. That's why it's not doing what I thought it would do. Let me block this. Here. So when I hover over it, you can see that a lot of things get downloaded.
Hmm.
I should do disable cache. And when I click on it, it's instant there.
Yeah.
And those are also things that you don't have to worry about. Just use our link component.
Hmm.
And we do also prefetching. So if you're on this page, we will prefetch those routes if they are in the viewport.
Hmm.
So there is a trade-off you have to make, because sometimes if you have a big navigation, we're preloading maybe too much, and the person's bandwidth might blow up if you have like a
Absolutely.
big navigation.
Hmm.
So that's something we are planning to add too, where you can just say like, okay, I don't want these to be preloading because maybe they're the navigation, like mostly navigation, you don't want to manually or like automatically preload. Only when they hover over, you want them
Correct.
to preload it, but
Yeah.
not by default because they're probably not really going to click on it.
Yeah.
A
Exactly.
call to action is different. You probably want to preload it because you hope that people click on it. So
Yeah.
it's a good one to like maybe prefetch or preload without the user even having to do anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
But those small things make the the user experience very well. Like even if we don't think about the JavaScript we have to ship, because that might be a little bit too big,
Hmm.
but for a user it's pretty like instant, and that's what you're like driving for.
Yeah.
So I think those are the main bits I wanted to show. But then if I do a web page test, I did one beforehand, and
Hmm.
that's where I still have to do optimizations. But that's why I love this tool, because Lighthouse is great for giving me like tips of like, hey, your images are not well versed, or like not well sized, or your LCP is low, this and that. But sometimes you have to really see it for yourself to know where does my problem lie, because now this is, I think I did like 4G
Hmm.
Moto G4 like slow device,
Yeah.
and for my taste it's still too long for 1.5 seconds to show anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's something that Lighthouse will tell me like, hey, it's too slow. But then like, okay, what's causing this? And um, okay,
And
this one connection is maybe too long, but
and like you said, the idea is, you can get recommendations from Lighthouse, which is great, but if you want, something relatively in depth, you know, you have to start to step away into, or you step into tools like WebPageTest.
yeah,
And, as you could tell, and for those who aren't familiar with WebPageTest, we had a more recent, probably about, I'm going to say maybe a month ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. We had a update, because we just wanted to really surface the data in a more kind of user friendly way, so that people could read the data and say, okay, I know what's going on here. And you can see right away the well, the waterfall chart is always going to be there, but the film strip, extremely important for some people,
No.
because they can visually tell what is going on. It's like, oh, 1.5 seconds. Okay, that might be a little too slow. Or you may see someone go from 0% to 75%, in terms of a visual completeness, but that 0 to 75 may also provide some insight into some ways that you might be able to improve that, and have it start earlier and go to 0 to 10% to then 25 or something of the sort. But um but yeah, the insights are what's key. And this is just the very first page. We can dig into so much more here. But the good part is that you have your core web vitals are all green.
Yeah.
That's something that we know, you notice right away. So your LCP is in the green. Your CLS, a big fat zero. Who knew that a big zero would be amazing. And uh and then your TBT obviously coming in at a good time as well. Um, you know, what are some of the patterns that you've seen in general with some of the possible challenges that people have with you know using Gatsby?
Yeah, I think out of the box Gatsby is super fast, does everything right, but then there's the user portion, right, where I'll just stop sharing because it's easier to talk.
Hmm.
The It's a user portion. Like, we're still in React. People can use npm for good and bad. They can download like very big libraries or components, all of that. Where it's like um, where we don't have enough control yet to see like, okay, what's causing what. Are they maybe putting everything in their layouts? Maybe they're loading a lot of things there, but instead of maybe lazy loading it, a bit React lazy, or maybe use like loadable, where you can
Hmm.
say like these components hydrate later, but the HTML is there. Those kind of things. We see people not doing that, and that's a big one where TBT like grows very exponentially.
Hmm.
But and then people don't know how to fix that because they just found that package on the internet, but they don't
Hmm.
know that there might be a lighter version, or maybe the version that they have does maybe 90% too much, and they're only using 10%. Those kind of things. That's, I think, the biggest pain point that we've seen with
Hmm.
Gatsby site, because React is so widely spread, and so it has such a great ecosystem, where it's also, again, the plugin ecosystem. You have many, but it also makes it very difficult to grade them well, or
Hmm.
find the right ones. And then other ones are the basics, like font loading. We are like looking into how can we help people do that correctly,
Yeah.
or at least give them advice. And the same goes like LCP. I think we did very well with the image component, like that works well. But fonts is the next big thing then,
Hmm.
and then third parties. That's, I think, one of the biggest one. And then, yeah, I'm gonna talk about this in my talk too, like the common pitfalls. But
Yeah.
many things where I feel that um, let me call it the new world, or like all the new like React frameworks,
Hmm.
views of the world. The developers that step in, they're used to writing components in JavaScript, like styled components, emotion, CSS becomes JavaScript too,
Hmm.
where some people forget what the browser can do, as in
Hmm.
like Tailwind, I think, is a good example, where they basically go back to the style sheet approach, but with a DX of like combining all the classes, and you get basically the same benefits as you would have with styled components, where you only load what's necessary. But people kind of forget what the browser can do, and they try to mimic it in React because they forgot, or they never had to deal with how you have done it in the past.
Hmm.
And that's I feel a struggle to teach, because
Hmm.
of course, like, you have to think, I need to get the job done, but then
Yes.
sometimes you also have to go back into, okay, how can I do it maybe better, or was my approach the right one? And yeah, that's I think the struggle. And it's what I'm going to talk about too. With a few small tweaks, you can like fix your layout shifts by using CSS and those kind of things.
It's I mean, you covered a lot right there. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to address something that was mentioned in the chat. And I hope I'm pronouncing this right. I'm TK. You know, if you do sign up for a free account at WebPageTest, you do keep some history. So you'll be able to go back and sort of look at the history of your profiling, and make some uh, look at some comparisons, and extract the data that you need at that point. And yes, you can compare two tests using history to get side by side film strip. Absolutely. Descartes J. I hope
Even
I'm
more than two.
well. You can do more than two. I mean, you know, yes, you can do more than two. Absolutely. So yes, thank you, web page test. If anyone didn't see my hands type, I just threw that like telepathically. I wrote that into the chat. Um, you mentioned the idea that sometimes people actually don't even, they're not sure, or they're not aware of some of the things that can be done. And it's really interesting that you should say that, because I think one of our mandates and campaigns is in sort of creating these kind of sort of like this kind of content, these conversations we're having. But we are also going to help people understand performance, how to look at performance data. When you do a profile, a sort of using web page test, what are you looking at? What does it mean? For example, I'm a big fan, and I don't know if we were talking about it now or previously, but I'm a big fan of the speed index, because it's actually one of the six uh, metrics that you get at a lighthouse, but people may not know what that means necessarily. And in web page tests, you could actually go in and take a look at not only the same information that Lighthouse is going to provide you, but there's actually a chart, or several charts, in fact, for you to actually. Do you have your page still up? From
Yes.
I think you should be able to share it, and I'd love to take a closer look at it to show. Yeah,
You're
there it
looking for
is.
this one?
Yeah, exactly. So, in this case, even though it is 1.5 seconds, even though it doesn't look, it looks sort of fairly spread, but you can see like the visual completeness happens almost entirely at 1.5 seconds. So these are things that you want to know, because sometimes the visual completeness will start earlier. And in fact, if you keep going down, you'll see some more data here with regards to the information that we surfaced, so you can make some of these comparisons and whatnot. So that's some of the important data that you can actually surface out of the same sort of test that you might have gotten at a lighthouse, out of just a few metrics. But here we'll take those same metrics and really deep dive a bit more. And but we plan on spending a little bit of time trying to break that down to folks. Just as you said, you believe that some of your users may not really understand completely what exactly is going on. So that we think is going to be very important in creating the best experience processing the results that you get from web page tests, so it doesn't just look like a bunch of numbers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
I think I do feel that like the browser main thread one
Mhm,
and like CPU utilization is one of the most intriguing graphs that you can see, because
mhm,
they tell you so much, but they're so difficult to understand if you don't know what like layout, paint, and all of
mhm,
those things means. But they sometimes show you like, okay, my script was done, but why does it only start executing here, for example? And then this helps, but it's so advanced that it's difficult to tell people how this works. And I think if like you can break this down when it matters, it would be a huge win.
absolutely. You mean, and again, I think with everything that's become performance right now, from being a developer like yourself, getting into the details, but we also have, and I know these are things that Gatsby discusses. We also have interest from the SEO community because they want to have a better understanding of what's going on, and they may not dig into the details like you do, but the surface data will be enough for them to say, oh, okay, I think I see what needs to be changed here, or what can be improved, or what is done perfectly. So I mean, that's one of the ideas that we have at WebPageTest, that a lot of different people can use the tool and
Yes.
and get the information that they want. I'm just going to look at this one comment here. Is it possible to track, connect, RUM, and inform confirmation navigation metrics with WebPageTest instead of? Well, I mean, for RUM information, I mean, we can get into greater details. Web pictures, that's awesome. Thank you. But we are set up so that we're connected to some real devices, and you can get a really good in-depth look at how things are reacting. Pardon the pun. With with your app. So the point here is to really get some the minutia of the things that are taking place for you and your application. Now, what does that entail? Well, I don't know if you've ever used. We talked about it earlier. Someone did. Anyways, the film strip, is an extremely powerful tool. You'll see a lot of people use it to make these very, clear, show these clear differences in some of the changes that they make. And again, I think I may have been, sometime, a month ago, I think I was watching one of your coworkers talk about, it might have been a webinar. I want to say, is it Grayson? Is it Grayson?
Grayson could be, yeah.
Yeah. And I think
If
he
it's
talked
about
about,
performance, then it's
pardon me?
Grayson. If it's performance, then it's Grayson.
Yes, it was, and I think he mentioned at some point, with some using the comparison tool, and you really see the differences, in some of the changes that you make, so that you can test and deploy some of these changes and see how it's going to work out. You talked about third party tags quite often enough. That's how you can create some of the the sort of changes that'll not get rid of the tags but make the experience a little better,
Yep.
because coming from publishing, you'll know that's like, okay, I'm not going to get rid of this. How do I make it work so that the user doesn't leave, you know
Yep.
and things like that. So, but yeah, so anyone who's not familiar with some of these tools, and something as simple as being able to keep a history of some of your work at webpage using WebPageTest, definitely sign up for a free account. Again, I'll remind everyone with the little banner here where my WebPageTest bingo. Um, and we also are sort of working on some things, just like the good people at Gatsby, that we hope to talk about in the coming weeks. um, but one of the immediate ones that we did release, like I said, about 3 weeks ago, was the new UI, which everyone is just sort of breathing a sigh of relief and really celebrating, because it does really surface some of that data as clearly, much more clearer than it's really ever been in the past. So that's been awesome to have. Um, is there anything else you want to sort of bring up? There's so much, I think, going on over at Gatsby. I think we could have made this even longer, but what what else do you feel we're going to be on a performance level? We might be surprised about next week.
Ooh, I think the most surprising is that performance never stops, and that we're even if we that you may have struggles with Gatsby to make it performant, or that it's not as clear. Like, the goal is to make every day a better experience, or every week or every month, where um, you can, like, it's in our DNA. We want to be performant, accessible, great DX, and that's what we'll strive for until the end of the days. So I think, and I think what I maybe want to do, make sure of that people know about it. We have. we are open source, but we also have our cloud side, which is CI/CD, but also hosting. And hosting is under Fastly because we didn't want to build it ourselves, and it's just like an amazing CDN.
Mhm.
And what people sometimes forget is the benefit of such a high scalable CDN instead of rolling on your own. And also, everything is like all the bolts are screwed how it should be for Gatsby. So all the headers, all the things like immutable headers, those kind of things that we can set, we will set. So if you just go for Gatsby Cloud, you know that you don't have to worry about, is my infrastructure good enough? So I think, and we're also going to make it faster and faster every day of the week. And I think lots of, or I know lots of the features we are rolling out will be not per se cloud only, but will be just because we have the hosting layer, we can do so much many optimizations. So we don't have to do it at build time, or the user doesn't have to build something on their own. And I think that's only going to make performance even better. Like I know I'm vague here, but
No, but it's it's actually a good point, and in terms of just kind of like not necessarily ruling it yourself. I mean, prior to today's chat, I had a meeting with someone nearby, actually in Germany, but we talked about sort of like creating your own personal dashboards sometimes, but you know other days you have some tooling that's ready to go, and it's really just about like, hey, you know what, let me just tweak this and have something that I don't have to spend a ton of time building myself and testing and everything else. You can go with something tried, tested, and true, and get everything that you need. And I mentioned that simply because this person for the company had built something on top of WebPageTest to surface the data that they need the most on a daily basis. So um, again, something that we like to talk about, and I think, well, we're going to release it soon. We recorded an episode with someone who had recently built this tool that was buzzing nicely on Twitter, and we were like, hey, hop on, and they talked about how they use web page tests to sort of like just extract this really fine strip of data that they just didn't want to go digging for all the time, and built it on top of a web page test. So we love to hear these stories where people sort of like, and you get back to the idea of developer experience, right? you know what can you do to make sure that the developer experience is as seamless as possible, so that it's you know it encourages this kind of usage. So
yeah.
uh you're going to say something, sorry.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, I think if you look maybe back, and I'm not sure if I can say it, but like SpeedCurve, for example, they I think made webpage test very visual, beautiful, where it like makes more sense. And now I think webpage test is doing exactly the same, where you don't like SpeedCurve always will have for people, but I mean webpage test is doing like the same and more, and you don't have to go to another party for it. But it's like just the small things that like just making data look different, just for some other people might resonate, and with other people something else might resonate, is so powerful. And the numbers are the same, but the visualization is different. So I think that's just amazing.
Yep. I'm going to say that I think so too. uh, but no, but it's absolutely correct, and that's part of that developer experience, like how seamlessly, just kind of like how smooth can you make it so that your workflow is completely uninterrupted.
Yeah.
So that's we're certainly striving for, and we're providing the tools for people to build something, whether it be for themselves or as PaaS, performance as a service, whatever. They're going
Yeah.
to come through and create something for you that you can just refer to like a giant dashboard. So
Yeah, because if you can automate clicking a button every day by using the web page test API, like you might save 5 minutes, but it's like 5 minutes every day or even every hour if you choose so. So why don't you automate it for
absolutely,
maybe like pennies if you look at it?
absolutely, and that's it. A lot of times people don't realize it until they're confronted with it. They're like, oh my God, I've been looking for this all my life. But that's awesome. You know what? We're gonna sort of like close out here. We want to thank everyone for coming in and joining us in our conversation with Wart and everything that they're doing at Gatsby. And again, I'm going to remind everyone that they have Gatsby Conf coming up next week, March 2nd and 3rd, if you part of some of their workshops.
Yep.
But that being said, we're also going to be there as well. The good people at WebPageTest, we're going to have a booth, so you can come by and check us out, ask some questions about the tool. And if you've never used WebPageTest, please, by all means, you can register for a free account there. And as someone said, of the many benefits you'll have from using it, you'll be able to kind of keep a log, a history of all your testing, and make these sort of comparisons and whatnot. I mean, I was saying when I spoke to, shout out Lacey, by the way, who I'm sure she's extremely busy, but I've always said that I felt web page tests and quote unquote the Jamstack were sort of like meant to be together. But I don't think a lot of people from the Jamstack actually know us that well yet. So that's why we're looking forward to being there and talking all things shop, performance shop, et cetera, and metrics and all that. So that said, Wart, man, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. This video is going to be edited and back up probably the next couple of days, so I'll let you know. And folks, if you missed it, by all means, you'll be able to watch it again. And I think that's pretty much it. So
Thank you as well for having me.
oh man, it was a pleasure, and we'll have to do this again. I really want to have that conversation again about sort of performance literacy that we talked about, that I think is
Yep.
going to be very important moving forward, so that people can really appreciate the power of Gatsby and the power of WebPageTest at the same time. So, and I think what I need to do here is say goodbye and